Well, hello. I did an analysis of one of Shakespeare's sonnets yesterday, and unfortunately there was some problem with the sound, so I had to delete it. So now I'm going to try and repeat what I did yesterday. So I want to look at Sonnet 130 by Shakespeare. Maybe at some future point I'll take another look at Sonnet 18, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? But it's so very famous, and I've already looked at it in my introduction to poetry that I thought I would start with a different sonnet, one that is not so famous. It's still quite famous, but maybe not one of the very best known poems by Shakespeare. It's addressed to the Dark Lady. It's the sonnet that begins, "My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun." So first of all, I should read it. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress when she walks treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. So that's the sonnet, and it will serve very well to describe the basic features of a sonnet. There are 14 lines in all sonnets, and the form of the sonnet was developed originally in Italy by Petrarch, and then developed a little more by other poets like Dante. During the English Renaissance, it became very popular in England and was taken up by Shakespeare, who wrote more than 150 of them. And he altered the Italian sonnet a little bit to be more suitable for the English language. And the Shakespearean sonnet is often called the English sonnet. So what is its format? Well, it has 14 lines, like all sonnets, but the Italian sonnet was a little bit different. The sonnets usually have an octave and a sestet. The octave is the first 8 lines when a problem is posed or a question asked, and then the last 6 lines, or the sestet, provides a solution or an answer to the question. And the octave and the sestet in the Italian sonnet, they are quite distinct, really. In the Shakespearean sonnet, it's not quite so obvious, because what we have is 3 quatrains and a couplet. A quatrain being 4 lines, a unit of 4 lines, which in Shakespeare's case rhymes A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. So you can see it's a little bit more difficult to define an octave and a sestet when the structure is like that. You have 3 rhyming quatrains, 12 lines, and then a final couplet, or 2 rhyming lines. Sometimes Shakespeare can pose his problem in the first 8 lines and answer in the last 6 lines, but this format also lends itself to posing a long question, or posing a difficult problem over 3 quatrains, and then providing the answer in the final couplet or two rhyming lines, or some kind of summing up. And that's probably what happens in this particular poem. Of course, all sonnets are iambic pentameter, that's to say, the lines are 10 syllables long, and they have 5 feet, 5 stressed units, and each unit is an unstressed and a stressed syllable. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. And most of Shakespeare's verse in his plays is also the same. It's iambic, although usually unrhyming iambic pentameter. Let's look at the first 4 lines, or the first quatrain of this poem. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hair be wires, black wires grow on her head. So usually in the sonnet, the poet gives a lot of exaggerated comparisons. His lady is like the sun, the lips are like coral, the breasts are very white, which was taken to be as a great compliment in Elizabethan England. But Shakespeare says he's not going to make these comparisons while actually kind of making them. So it's like the question he poses in Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? He says he's not going to compare the loved one to the summer's day because the loved one is better. But in a way, the whole thing is about comparing the loved one to a summer's day. So similarly here, he says he's not going to make these comparisons, and yet in a kind of way he points them out. It's ironic, it's kind of light-hearted, it's a twist, it's a clever twist on what sonneteers usually do. Shakespeare says he's not going to fall into the trap that most writers of sonnets fall into by just making a lot of senseless comparisons which don't really have any meaning. So he says his mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Her lips are not as red as coral. If snow is white, then her breasts are dun or brown. Dun is not a word frequently used now, but that's what it means, brown. And if hair be wires, black wires grow on her head. There was some controversy about whether this dark lady was genuinely a black woman or just an English woman with dark hair. It's hard to say. There would not have been many black women probably in Elizabethan England, but a few for sure, and any that were there would have stood out and no doubt have been very interesting to the local people, maybe part of diplomatic missions, so on and so forth, or just travellers from other lands. There were a few. Anyway, we don't know. The bit about black wires grow on her head, I don't know, that kind of suggests that it could be black hair. He hasn't seen black hair before, and it looks like wire to him. It's very different to European hair. But on the other hand, like I said, there would not be very many black women in Elizabethan England, so we just don't know, and it's not really important anyway. So what he's doing is established in that first quatrain. He's, in a very smart, clever way, he's saying that he's not going to compare his mistress to all these things, and he's not making exaggerated comparisons like other sonneteers. And he continues in the same vein in the second quatrain. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks, and in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. So yeah, it's normal to compare the cheeks of the loved one to roses, beautifully patterned roses, red and white, damasked. But he doesn't see it, the poet doesn't see such a resemblance, doesn't see those roses in her cheeks. It's also normal to compare the lady to beautiful smells and perfumes. But he says, actually, perfume is far more beautiful in its smell than his lady, than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I think in modern English, reek has taken on a stronger connotation than it probably had in Shakespeare's time. Reek is like a very strong, unpleasant smell in modern English, but I don't think it had the strength and unpleasantness at Shakespeare's time. Just meant smell. And then again, there is no real development. He just continues in the same way. In the next quatrain, I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. So, in the same vein, he says that music has a far more pleasing sound than her voice. And he says, I grant I never saw a goddess go. I grant means I admit I never saw a goddess go. But anyway, my mistress, she walks on the ground, she treads on the ground. So just for the first three quatrains, just continuing in the same vein the whole time, talking about the false comparisons he is not going to make that most sonneteers would usually make, although they are fantastic and don't really have any basis in reality. And then in the final couplet, he kind of sums it all up and tells you what his position is. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. So, the fact that he's not making all these fantastic comparisons doesn't mean that he doesn't love his lady, his mistress. He loves her as much as or more than all those sonneteers making false comparisons. But, how can someone's eyes really be like the sun? How can lips be as red as coral? How can a voice be as pleasing as music? So he's just saying that all these comparisons are false. However, she is just as beautiful and dear to me as all those women that the poets make false comparisons about. So it's kind of sweet in a way, and it's also a bit arch. It's kind of ironic and disingenuous. He's saying he's not making the comparisons, and yet at the same time he kind of is. A lot of people like it because it goes against the grain and it's not like the average sonnet. As often happens with Shakespeare, he's able to find a new twist, something that is interesting, so he just doesn't keep just repeating himself the whole time. So this is a nice poem and a good introduction to the sonnet. Let me read it one more time to finish. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hers be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks, and in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare.